Okay, Rabbi Sai, it's wonderful to see everybody, and a couple of chevra. I don't know why it keeps on going to this sheet, but we'll clear that for a sec. Okay, a couple of chevra that usually here in person are exclusively online this evening, and very soon they should have a Revuah Shalema, and all of the Omicrons and other Greek letters should be defeated. And it should be good. We left off with somewhat of a discussion last week after discussing that fascinating Rashba with regards to the nature of Elohim Achirim and the relationship between Elohim Achirim. Let's put this on Do Not Disturb. There we go. The relationship between Elohim Achirim and different nations of the world experiencing different relationships with Hashem. Somebody wrote in the question, which we are going to delve into in significant detail in the coming weeks and months, which is, what are we supposed to do about the fact that it seems quite clear that what Klal Yisrael does to the nations of Canaan is like pretty intense, to put it fairly mildly, right? That's not something that one would want or recommend or desire as a first case scenario. And the relationship that we have with the 7 nations of Canaan is something that is certainly, or said mildly, is challenging to our modern paths, right? And we'll see this in greater detail as we go through the Psukim. But before we can talk about anything, the very clear militaristic edge of Yehoshua entering into Eretz Yisrael has a very deep theological context and connotation. And we're going to see this explicitly noted in the Pasuk in Perek Daled, at least the way that Chazal understand this Pasuk in Perek Daled, which the Ramban is going to explain to us. But it begins with a fundamental and probably not often learned Ramban al HaTorah in Parashas Achemos. Pasuk says as follows: after discussing, or in the context of discussing, all of the different sexual improprieties that a person should not engage with, the Pasuk says, Al titamu b'chol eile, don't impurify yourself with all of these things, ki b'chol eile nitmeu hagoyim asher ani meshalech mipneichem, because it was with all of these things that the nations that I'm going to send away from before you, that they defiled themselves with. Okay. V'titma haaretz, and the land became impure. Ve'evkod avona alea, and I recalled its sin upon it. V'taki haaretz es yeshveha, and the land spat out its inhabitants. Now, this is long before Yehoshua, right? This is middle of Sefer Vayikra. This is before the Meraglim. This is before the Misonim. This is Moshe Rabbeinu is the leader of the Jewish people, and he's telling them, don't engage in morally repugnant activities, because that's the reason that the nations that are currently inhabiting Eretz Yisrael are being sent out. That's the reason. You're going to take over this land because this land cannot handle those people. So the verbiage of Vataki haaretz es yeshveha is that there seems to be something inherent in the nature of the land. The land is going to spit out people that are acting in a sexually immoral way. Okay. On this there is a long Ramban, which we touched on a little bit outside last time, and we're going to understand inside now, because this is fundamentals and Yesodis for understanding much of Sefer Yehoshua, but also understanding Vayikra and understanding what Eretz Yisrael is. There's a lot to understand here. Now, this copy of the Ramban I have is from the new Osvadar copy. So, and it's I don't think I put it onto the notes yet online, but it will be. Take a look. There's a lot of tremendous footnotes that we're not going to get a chance to get to, but they did a really nice job. Aside from the fact that the print is very clear and the nikudos are wonderfully and very well done. So makes it for simpler reading of a very tough Ramban. So the Ramban quotes from the pasuk, "Vatitma haaretz va'ifkod avana aleh vataki haaretz," that the land became defiled. I ifkod, the lashon of pikida, meaning to remember, to recall, to bring to attention. Avana aleh, the sin that is upon it, v'taki haaretz eshiveh, and the land is going to spit out its inhabitants. The Ramban implicitly asks the obvious question, which is, what does sexual immorality have to do with the land? Right? That's not something that seems to have anything to do with each other. Land and sexual immorality, meaning, I understand the Torah tells us that if the Jews will not keep Shemitah, that they will be exiled. But what does sexual impropriety have to do with the land? Says the Ramban, Hechmir HaKasav ba'arayis. The Torah is specific about sexual impropriety. Ba'avur ha'aretz shetitamei bahem, because of the land that will become defiled through them, and spit out and vomit out the people that perpetrate these crimes. It says, V'hinei ha'arayis chavos haguf. Arayis are things that pertain to the body. Ve'enam teluyos ba'aretz. They have nothing to do with the land. This is not a land-oriented sin. This isn't something that you should say the land should care about. It says, Aval soida davar b'kasav she'amar b'hanchel elyon goyim. The secret of this matter, the Ramban explains, is from the pasuk in Dvarim, b'hanchel elyon goyim, ba'afrido b'nei adam yatsev gvulos amim, l'mizbar b'nei Yisrael ki chelek Hashem amo Yaakov chevel nachlaso. That pasuk, b'hanchel elyon goyim ba'afrido b'nei adam, when Hashem separates when Hashem separates humanity and gives each person, each nation, their allotment of land, within that, ki chelek Hashem amo, Hashem's people are His portion. What's the reference that pasuk? Where's that pasuk from? Which parasha? It's from Hazid, right? So, Bafrido b'nei Adam, when Hashem is separating people, when is Hashem separating people? So Rashi points out that this goes all the way back to Bereshis. This is the Dar HaPalaga. This is the age of dispersion, where people built a tower to go up to the heavens. What they were doing there, not for now. But resultant from that, Hashem separates everybody and says, you go there, you go there. Within that, Ki chelek Hashem amo, what's up, Doc? Ki chelek Hashem amo, the Hashem's nation is His people. Says Rashi, this is when Hashem chooses Avram Avinu. Ki chelek Hashem amo. Okay. Veha inyan, this matter, that Hashem is choosing people and separating people, and this has something to do with lands. It says, Veha inyan ki Hashem hanichbad barakol. That Hashem created everything. V'sam koach tachtanim be'elyonim. And gave power over that which is below to those that are on high. The footnote here quotes from the Ricanti, one of the Mikubali Italia, that that there is power from things that are above on things that are below, meaning that there is cause and effect in the world, as we noted last time, and things that are larger or higher in the order of creation have power on that which is lower. We'll say it like very simply from a physics, biology, physiology, climatology standpoint. We as human beings are at the mercy of the forces of nature. That's a reality. Anybody that has ever witnessed a hurricane knows exactly what that means. Right? We are at the mercy of those forces bigger than us. So that's some koach hatachtanim ba'elyon, that the power of that which is below is in the hands of that which is higher. Meaning we are not in control of all of the aspects of our life. Much of our life is controlled by things bigger than us. V'nasam al kol am va'am be'artisam legoyehem kaichav umazal yadua. Every single nation, every place in the world, has things that control it. A particular star, particular constellation. Meaning that there's a certain way of the natural order of things that affects certain areas of the world in certain ways. The power of a particular place is governed by the reality of that. Now, on a very simple psychological level, because as we've noted before, everything is in gradated and stacked orders. There's a phenomenon that people have observed that in cold and dark climates, people are more depressed. Seasonal depression. In Florida, people are happy. Baruch Hashem, right? Which means that if you live here, you have a different outlook on certain things in the world than if you live in other places. Now, can you choose to change your mindset against the place that you are? Yes. But that would then become strange. You would become estranged from the rest of society around you by thinking radically differently. And you see certain places give rise to certain cultures as a result of where they are and when they are in history. That there are certain things that give rise to particular ways of thinking that at some point in time become outdated or old-fashioned, when nobody's interested in those things anymore, and other things become very popular. And sometimes these things work cyclically, in like strange ways. Fashion is for sure like that, although that's often contrived, right? Like the fact that I was discussing this with a couple of my 10th graders a little while ago, that every year smartphone manufacturers have to come up with a new chiddush. So at first the iPhone had round corners. And then, big chiddush, the iPhone had square corners. Right, not as round. Then a couple of generations later, big chiddush, making it round corners. And then, no, I think now we're back at square corners, right? If you have a round corner one, then yeah, it looks like, so part of that is contrived, obviously, so that things always seem current. But there's also certain realities that at a certain point in time are like very old-fashioned ideas, and then they become very exciting. And that's as a result of the times and spaces and places that things are. Now, it's also why, for example, there's certain people, certain writers, certain thinkers that in their lifetime nobody cares about them, and then all of a sudden, like 25 years after they die, like all of a sudden everybody's reading them. Everybody cares about this now, right? So you see this nebuch with artists that like live their whole life in poverty, and then 100 years later, like their portrait that they wish that they could have gotten like 2 shekels for is selling for like $25 million, right? Nebuch. Okay, so every nation is controlled by the environment, the natural and supernatural aspects psychologically and geographically, geopolitically of that place that they are. It says, Kasher Noida Beis Tagninus, as is known in astrology. Now, there's a footnote here, which he says, if you take a look, the Ramban explains this in much greater detail. He says, V'zeh Shalom, this is what the Pasuk says, Asher Chalak Hashem Elokecha Osam L'chol Amin, that Hashem has divided up amongst all of the nations. Ki Chalak L'kulam Mazalos V'Shamayim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given every nation their own mazalos. Everybody's got their own constellations, their own, what today we would refer to as luck. But luck is the wrong word for it. The better word is non-physical orders of control. The things that are outside of...
Literally non-physical, not necessarily, right? It could be, but it's just at a different level of abstraction.
Right.
It's not the normal forces we refer to.
Right, meaning we're not talking about like, the laws of gravity. Right? We're talking about things that are compounded upon all of these things. It says, Ugvayim aleim malachi elyon. And above that are malachi elyon. Not something else, sorry, aleim. Sar Malchus Paras Omed Lenegdi. Daniel refers to the Sar Malchus Paras. Or Rashi famously tells us that Yaakov was fighting with Sorrow Shel Esav. Right? Now, above the mazalos are the Sorim. Sorim are an important thing to understand. There's the Sar of Malchus Paras and the pasuk in Daniel. Vini Sar Yovan Ba. V'nikra Malem Malachim, and they are called Malachim, kings. I was left there with the kings of Paras, the kings of Persia. What are these? Sorry, these ministering angels. So angels, we've noted a number of times before. The Rambam explains that the lashon of malach means a shaliach, an emissary. Right? These are the emissaries of Hashem that create certain realities in the world. And certain of these realities are very deeply embedded realities in the way that people and cultures and humanity understand certain things. Now, if we would say that, America is going to war against Iraq, right? This happened a number of years ago. Who is going to war against him? You can't point to a person. It's not a person, right? It's what's that?
Hyper-organism.
Right. It is much larger than a person. There are certain wars that have lasted much longer than a generation. There are things that are bigger than people and bigger than their times, that are two competing ideologies. The Cold War, for example, was probably most palpable in this because no shots were fired. It was simply two competing ideologies. There were two ideals that were fighting against each other. I mean, obviously it had to be accompanied with the threat of bigger army diplomacy, but which is why it was a Cold War. But effectively it was a war of capitalism versus communism. Now, who won that war between capitalism and communism? Arguably neither. Both adapted. Now, Russia today is not the superpower of communism. That would probably be China. But China is not the same kind of communism that Russia was. And America today is not the same kind of capitalism as it was during the Cold War. Right? Both have adapted, significantly adapted. So you see the weakening to a certain extent of both of these sarim, or maybe the growth of both of these sarim. But from that perspective of the Cold War, America today is not the victor that was dreamed of during those years. And arguably, I think Russia would agree that the same thing would be true. Not that they'd admit it, but no, the same. That's neither here nor there. But when you have this notion of a sar, that means the disembodied, abstract, almost amalgamation of the entirety of the personality of that nation. That thing which defines a national identity, an idea, an ideology. That is larger, that is bigger, that is more abstract, that is loftier than the abstract, semi-physical realities that create a particular nation, that sustain a particular nation, right? Like America's geography and geology and natural resources and coastline and weather, all of those things are mazalos. Those things have an enormous effect on every area of the United States. But then there's things that are much bigger than that, which is ideas, ideology. And those are things that people live in service of, as we pointed out last time. Those are called sarim. And the Ribbon Shalom is the power of all powers, that's Elokei Elokim, and the master of all masters, the Chol HaOlam, for the entirety of the world. The Ribono Shel Olam is above all of the mazalos and sarim and all of these levels of cause and effect. The Ribono Shel Olam is the ultimate cause. What's referred to by the Kadmonim as ilos ha'ilos, right? The cause of all causes. This the Rambam refers to actually in our parsha, right? When Hashem says to Moshe, "I'd like you to go to I'd like you to go down to Mitzrayim," so Moshe, amongst one of the many things that Moshe Rabbeinu says, he says, "Who am I going to say is sending me?" So the Ribono Shel Olam says, "Tell them who." Ehyeh asher ehyeh. What does Ehyeh asher ehyeh mean? I will be as I will be. Right. So the Rambam points out that the Ribono Shel Olam is the only thing in the entirety of the Bria, or outside of it, that can say Ehyeh asher ehyeh, which means the identity of the Ribono Shel Olam, the reality of the Ribono Shel Olam, is entirely self-defined. Every other thing that exists in creation is not Ehyeh asher ehyeh. It's Ehyeh asher yiyeh. I'll be if something else will be. Meaning, my existence is contingent upon the existence of other things. Right? Like humanity exists on planet Earth contingent upon oxygen. If there's not oxygen, then there's not people. That's just it.
So Ehyeh asher ehyeh means like a tautology in this case?
It means I exist only as a result of my own existence.
Right.
Meaning there is no cause that is understandable. Ribono Shel Olam is. Right? In a very deep way, this is also what Hashem is showing Moshe Rabbeinu at the sneh, which is a flame that is not consuming the bush, which means that the flame exists independent of the bush. Right? It looks like it's dependent, but it's not dependent. It is an independent entity. Because if you take away the fuel, the flame will still continue. Which is the depth and profundity of what Hashem is showing Moshe Rabbeinu. That's the Jewish people. Klal Yisrael as a whole is also existent beyond causality.
But there they choose to focus on the lack of consumption of the fuel as opposed to the independence of the flame.
Yes.
Which kind of
both are true, and the Midrashim speak on both sides. There's a lot to understand there. There's a lot to unpack. Maybe over Shabbos we'll be able to unpack a little bit more about this now. Which, just sneak peek, the Sforno points out that the sneh wasn't a physical entity; it was a Mara Nebuah. This was prophetic, which is very Rambamist in the minimization of personal miracles. Which the Rambam was a big fan of, but the Sforno says that that's pshat in the pasuk. When the pasuk says "Vayira elav Malach Hashem," that a Malach Hashem appears to Moshe in this fire that's coming out of the sneh. So he says that it doesn't say that Moshe saw it. It means that there was something that appeared to him. That sounds like it was a Mara Nebuah. That notwithstanding, the Ribono Shel Olam is independent. And everything else in the world is dependent on the existence of Hashem. And the Sarim and the Mazalos all control everything that they control. Aval Eretz Yisrael emtzaus hayishuv, but Eretz Yisrael is the center of human dwelling in the world. Now, this is a very common idea throughout the Kadmonim, that Eretz Yisrael is at the center of the globe, which certainly was, I mean, if not geographically true, was close to being geographically true. It is at the epicenter of Europe, Asia, and Africa. Right, that is the meeting point, crossroads of those three areas of the world. But more fundamental than that, it is the Emtzos HaYishuv. It's the place upon which everybody is focused, which, fascinatingly, is still true ad hayom hazeh. Right. Now, there is no good reason to explain why so much of the news and the United Nations is focused on this little sliver of land. It doesn't make any sense. Elamai, this is the Emtzos HaYishuv. This is the center of where humanity coalesces to. We mentioned once or twice before, and this is just a fascinating thing to consider, is that with all the talk of atheism in the United States and the West and all the rest of it, let's just own the fact that there is a concept called the city of God, that the three major religions of the world, at least three of the major religions of the world, Buddhism and Hinduism notwithstanding, but certainly the three major religions of the West, accept, one, that it exists, and two, where it is, which is astounding, right? The question is who controls it. But when you think about the fact that half of the population of the world agrees to the idea that there is a place that the presence of God rests in, and it's simply and we know where it is. Everybody agrees where it is, that Yerushalayim is that place. It's just a question of who's in charge of it. That's fairly astounding. That's a big thing to agree on. It's fairly huge. So the Ramban says, Eretz Yisrael is the Emsos HaYishuv. He Nachalas Hashem, this is the inheritance of Hashem. Miyuchedes Lishmo. It is unique and singular to the name of Hashem. Velo nasan aleh mina malachim katzin shoter u'moshe. The Rebbe Shalom has not given over power to that place to any other natural or abstract entity. Eretz Yisrael is not a place that is governed by anything other than the Rebbe Shalom. Now, to a very significant extent, this is true on a bottom basement level of eating, right? If you want to eat food in Eretz Yisrael, Moshe Rabbeinu says this explicitly, if you want to be able to live in Eretz Yisrael, what do you need? Uniquely in Eretz Yisrael, as opposed to anywhere else in the ancient world, you need rain. That's how you eat in Eretz Yisrael, right? There is not enough geography, natural resources to provide you with irrigation to be able to drink water and grow crops. You just don't have enough. There isn't. If you want to be able to live in Eretz Yisrael, you need Hashem. This is the Gemara at the beginning of Maseches Taanis, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not give over the power of rain to any other nation. Now, almost every other ancient society was a river valley society, the Nile being the opposite of Eretz Yisrael. That's Moshe Rabbeinu always compares the two. There's Eretz Yisrael, and then there is Eretz Mitzrayim. And those two places are not the same. Eretz Yisrael requires a relationship with Hashem in order for anything to happen. There are no there's no mazalos that make it happen. It's just not going to work. It says, therefore, when the Rebbeinu Shalom gives it over to the Jewish people, you're going to be special to me because the whole land belongs to me. You will be mine and I'll be yours. You'll be my people, I'll be your God. You are not governed by Elohim Acherim, by other forces at all. There's no other natural, geological, geographical, astronomical, astrological force that controls the Jewish people. Only Hashem. And this group of people that is going to live in the place that is exclusively governed by the master of all worlds, that place has specific rules. Yeah.
How do the Sarim and the Mazalot factor into that previous statement about Hashem being exclusive to Am Yisrael?
Oh, I mean, the pasuk v'yisim li la'am, or
שתהייתם אל אלוהים אחרים כלל.
Right.
לא
So,
שתהיה.
so "V'anochi eyeh lochem le'elohim," I will be your Elohim, means I will be the exclusive power over you. Me, Rebbeinu Shalom alone. As opposed to every other nation in the world that engages with Elohim Achirim. There are other powers, other forces that they have to contend with. We only contend with the CEO. We don't speak to middle management. Right? We have protectia. But along with that protectia, at least in Eretz Yisrael, comes a set of requirements. He says, the Rebbeinu Shalom says, you want to live in this place and have this kind of relationship with me, understand that it comes with some strings attached, which means that you need to live in accordance with a particular value system in terms of morality, control over base desires, and many instructions. Liyasam Lishma, in order to belong to Hashem. That's what the pasuk says. Ushmaitem es kol chugosai ve'es kol mishpatai v'asisem osam v'lo taki haaretz v'lo taki eschem haaretz. If you keep my mitzvahs, then the land will not spit you out. Means living in this place requires you to understand that we have a direct relationship. Means you're under the microscope. You need to behave appropriately living in this place. Uksiv, and the pasuk says, "Va'omar lachem atem tirshu es ad masam." You are going to inherit their land. Va'ani etneno lachem lareshes hasan. I will give it to you to inherit. Eretz v'aschal v'dvash, a land flowing with milk and honey. Ani Hashem Elokeichem. I am Hashem, your God. Asher hivdalti eschem min ha'amim, that I separated you from the rest of the world. I'm separating you. You are now going to live in a particular way in this place, and that is your job, your requirement. Yomar, that means ki hivdil osanu mikol ha'amim, that Hashem has separated us from all other nations. Asher nasan alehem sarim ve'elohim achirim, the Rebbeinu Shalom has given other governing bodies over those nations. V'sito lanu es haaretz she'yehu yisbarach lanu le'elokim. In giving us the land, Hashem is making himself our God, meaning the exclusive power over us. V'niyem yuchadim lishmo, and we become exclusive to Hashem. V'hinei haaretz shehi nachlas Hashem anichbad taki kol metame osa v'lo tisbol avdei avodah zara u'megalim aras. And this land, therefore, cannot handle people that are cheating on God. That's what it means, avdei avodah zara. People that are cheating on God, u'megalim aras, or living in a morally decrepit way. There needs to be a sense of moral propriety. Now, within the list of arayos, the last thing that is mentioned there is not giving your children to Molech, not sacrificing your children to Molech. And the Ramban deals with this, yeah. We'll see if, very briefly. It says, and in this parsha, Hashem speaks about the prohibition of offering your children to Molech, in order to create a parallel, an equivalence between Avodah Zarah and Gila Arayos. That these two things are the most morally decrepit things, and these are the things that the land of Israel is most sensitive to. Val kulam amar, and on all of this, the pasuk says, "Al titamu b'chol ele ki b'chol ele nitmu hagoyim." Don't defile yourself in this way, because this is how all the other nations have defiled themselves living in the land of Israel. V'chein amar, and in addition, the parsha says the parsha a little bit later on, "Va'avdil eschem min ha'amim liyosli." I'm going to separate you. You're going to be mine. Shehu chomer isur avodah zarah, which is expressing the strength of the prohibition of avodah zarah. Ulekach amar, and to that end, the pasuk says, "Ki mibnei shehem yuchadim lishmos," since we belong to Hashem, ba'avur kain nasana lahem haaretz. That is the reason that we have the land. Shneimar va'omar lachem atem tirshu es ad masam. You're going to inherit this land. Va'ani etneno lachem lareshes ha'isa. I'm going to give it to you to inherit it. Ani Hashem Elokeichem. I am Hashem your God. Asher hivdalti eschem min ha'amim, that I separated you from the other nations. Meaning, very clear. Says the Ramban, living in Eretz Yisrael means that we deal exclusively with Hashem. There is no other power to contend with. And to that end, there is an additional level of expectation and scrutiny living in accordance with a particular moral code.
We haven't done any real explanation of why it's a raya specifically. Avodah zarah, sure,
Right.
but a raya is still.
So we'll see if we have time to explain that a little bit deeper. He's going to contrast this. He says, "V'hinei b'chutz la'aretz," outside of the land of Israel, in Boca Raton, Florida, "af al pi shakol l'shem hanichbad," even though it is true that everything that we do is connected to Hashem and that Hashem is still in control of the entirety of the world. He says, "Ein atara ba shlem." There is no perfect purity here. Ba'avur hamesharsim hamosh lemala, because of all of the various entities that rule over it, the natural orders that affect where we live. Va'amim taim acharei sarihem la'avod gam osam, and the nations stray after these powerful, abstract, ideological forces, and they worship them. For example, in America today, no matter, I think we gave this example once before, in America today, there is no such thing as not being democratic. Meaning, no matter how much you believe in whatever you believe in, from the far right to the far left, nobody is going to argue that democracy is not the best way for the world to operate. You can try, but you'll be gunned down. It's not going to happen in America. In America, democracy is truth. In Iran, that's not necessarily the case. Yesh v'yesh. There are some people in Iran that believe in democracy, and other people in Iran that mamish don't. And that's not just like, decrepit totalitarian leaders that believe that democracy is bad. There's lots of run-of-the-mill people that support a totalitarian government. They think that that is the correct way to run a government. Now, that's bizarre to our mindset. That's astoundingly bizarre to our mindset. But that is bedrock. If you ask your average American, fifth grader, why is democracy better? He won't have an answer for you. He'll tell you, something about England and king and independence and whatever. But like, why? Why is democracy better? Weiß ich nicht. You can have a well thought out discussion with mature adults about the topic. But in Iran, take a frum Iranian Muslim child growing up believing that Sharia law is the way that it's supposed to be. Kacha. It's going to say that that's correct. Why is that correct? Because that's correct. Now, those perspectives that we have that are bedrock to society, so they worship these things. Everything is in service of these grand abstract ideologies. And that governs the way that people run their lives and live their lives and the decisions that they make and the moral indiscretions that they are willing to accept. Right? There are certain moral indiscretions that in America are, you can always tell, like, which crimes are, like, countries okay with. Right? Meaning, on the books in America, adultery is illegal. I think it's a second-degree federal misdemeanor. I don't think anybody has been tried for adultery in the United States in a very long time. No. America's okay with adultery. There are other countries in the world that are not okay with adultery. America is not okay with speeding 20 miles over the speed limit. Other countries are okay with it. Right? Meaning, depending on where your understanding of the world is, so which discretions or indiscretions you care about, okay. Everybody can agree that something is good or bad, but like, how much do you really care about it? So, no. The Seder. Says Lukach Yomra Kosov, And to that end, the pasuk says in Yeshaya, Elohei kol haaretz yikareh, that one day the Rebbe Hashem will be called the God of all the land. Why? Because who Elokei ha'elokim ha'mashal hakol. He's the Rebbe Hashem. He's God. He rules over everything. V'hu yifkod basayif al tzva marim, and he will, in the end, be the one recognized as being in charge of all things. Al tzva marim b'marim la'asim memshalas ha'elyonim, to cut out all of the memshalas ha'elyonim, the ruling of all of these high abstract ways of thinking that are national identities, and to destroy the way of all of these servants that are effectively running their own independent places. And then Hashem will be king over kings of the earth, meaning that Hashem will have a direct relationship with every nation, as opposed to it being through the prism of whatever powers, natural, supernatural, metanatural, philosophical, psychological. V'zeu inyan she'amar b'gzeras irin b'sgama me'ver kedishin she'elta, pasuk in Daniel, yomar ki hadavar ahu hanigzar al Nebuchadnezzar b'gzeras irin she'gazru al hakachas ha'nesalim me'em la'asos kach v'yikaru irin ki me'atzilosam yis'oru hakachas b'chol ha'pulas. The power is referred to in Daniel as irin because it is ma'orer. It awakens the latent potential in all things. I'm going a little quickly here. It says ve'alu ir ve'kadosh min shemayim nachis ve'karib b'chayil v'chein amar godu ilana v'gomer umamer kadishin she'elasa kalaymar she'ishalu me'alyonim haratzon alav v'achrei chein gozru le'asas kein. There are gradated steps, and at some point in time, all of that's going to fall away. That's how the Ramban is defining it. V'zeh she'amar lo Daniel u'gzeras ilahi, all these powers that you recognize are all coming from Hashem, ki hakol me'itah yisbarach, because everything comes from Hashem. Now, let's talk about what happens outside of Eretz Yisrael. It says, V'inei Hashem ha'nechbad Elokei ha'elokim b'chutz la'aretz, ve'elokei Eretz Yisrael, shi nachlas Hashem, v'zeh tam v'zana acharei Elohei nechar ha'aretz. In Eretz Yisrael, there is no Elohim achirim. There's what's referred to as Elohei nechar, which means, what does nechar mean? Nochri? Foreign, strange. Outside of Eretz Yisrael, there are many powers that define what's going on. Recognizing and appealing to anything other than the Ribbon Shalom inside of Eretz Yisrael is Elohei nechar. It is a strange God, meaning a strange source of power, one that doesn't belong here. It's a transplant, and one that is disquieting, is uncomfortable, is not a thing that should be plugged into Eretz Yisrael. Like, if you would end up with basically like a hardcore, like Chinese communist coming to an American liberal arts college and sitting in humanities courses. So you imagine like that kid like debating with every professor, and the professor is saying, okay, like it's enough. Like we're done having these conversations. Like you do you, just not here. It doesn't belong here, right? Every teacher has had like the kid that is asking the question that like, if you're in the shir, you already accept certain things to be true. Certain things are axiomatic. If you're showing up unclear about like the baseline of what the class is, like, right?
So it's kind of like having the current parliamentary structure in the Knesset instead of Sanhedrin.
Yeah, to a certain extent. Right? Or the structure less so being the problem, but the value system of it, right? Right. This is something that pains people in Eretz Yisrael all the time, right? That the way that Eretz Yisrael is being run is not in accordance with the values of Torah mitzvahs. Now, it's a lot more than it used to be, which is good news, but there's a long way to go. She says, "V'zana," meaning that's the lashon of znus, right? Of sexual impropriety. V'zana acharei elahei nechar haaretz. This is cheating on God with some stranger. She says, "Kia elahos nachrim ba'eretz Hashem v'nachlasa." Because all of these powers are strangers in Hashem's home. This is what the pasuk says. Lo yadu es mishpat Elohei haaretz. They don't know the law of Elohei haaretz. What does Elohei haaretz mean? The God of this land. Which land? Eretz Yisrael. Which God? Rebbeinu Shalom. Right? They don't understand. We're talking about Vayishalach bam es ha'arayos. And then Hashem sends out these lions. Vinam mimitim osam kasher enam yodim es mishpat Elohei haaretz. This is we'll get into the story a little bit later. This is the kutim that lions come and they start chowing them, they start devouring them in the middle of Eretz Yisrael. Why? Says the pasuk, they don't know what they're supposed to be doing in Eretz Yisrael. They don't know how to engage with this land. There is only one recipe for engaging appropriately with Eretz Yisrael. If not, it doesn't work. It says, "V'inei akutim lo hayu anushim ba'artzam ba'avdam es Eloheihem." This is fascinating. The kutim, before they got to Eretz Yisrael, nobody was punishing them. There's no punishment there. Meaning, where they were, the way that they were engaging with the powers of the place that they were was fine. L'shalach bam es ha'arayos. Hashem didn't send lions to eat them where they were. But when they came to Eretz Yisrael, they did what they used to do. Then these lions come and they eat them. Meaning, in your home, do as you wish.
So I'm wondering this whole time. So this is a delicate kind of balance. They Elohim Acharim exist, right? This is not.
Yes.
The age-old, almost, even modern question. It seems to be giving validity to Elohim Achirim al panai, right? But they seem to exist. This is saying very much so, and in fact, the real, and you can even potentially worship them in some sense.
Right.
It's not that there is no other. It's that there's no greater, and so it's really it's conflating. Our notion of a divinity. It's in some ways not. It's erasing that distinction, and no, these things are real. There are Elohim Achirim.
Yeah,
they govern elsewhere, and they can even be worshipped elsewhere.
Meaning, the worship of them is incorrect always. But
they weren't punished.
Right? Why? Because the Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't have a relationship with the Kutim. The Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't have a relationship with them. Meaning, this is a group of people doing what they do as they wish, living their lives. Meaning, there's a natural order that they are following. Then there is no national relationship between Hashem and the Kutim.
But it's still incorrect for them to.
It's wrong, sure. But meaning, they are living in accordance with the natural order. And there's reward and punishment within the natural order, and that's just that. There's no eternity to their national identity. But in Eretz Yisrael, which is the place of the Rebbeinu Shalom, there is nothing other than having a relationship with Hashem. Because that's how you live there. So you need to acquiesce to that, to the rules of that relationship. Meaning you can avoid having a relationship with Hashem. Meaning, at least as a non-Jew. You can avoid having a relationship with Hashem and have a good life. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, sure, there's plenty of things wrong with violating Shabbat mitzvahs b'nei Noach. But the Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't have a direct relationship with the nations of the world. He has an indirect relationship with them through whichever ideologies they are defining and containing. And were it to be that a nation would subvert the Sorim and Elohim Achirim of their land, so then they would pay the price for that. Because the Rebbeinu Shalom has created the world such that in these places, this is how you live optimally. So it's like a cause and effect. You know, I'm saying, like, if your nation lives on the coast, and instead of engaging like a mountainous coastline, I don't know, you live in Norway, and instead of making your economy based on fish and sailing and whatever, you're going to decide that you are going to base the entire economy, I don't know, on growing mangoes. It's not going to work. Like, you'll die. That doesn't work.
Why lions as the vehicle to deliver that message?
We'll get there when we get to Malachim.
Okay.
It's a good question. Okay. It says, it says, V'chein, Shalom, brothers, how the Sifra tells us, V'lo saki eschem haaretz, that the land shouldn't spit you out. Eretz Yisrael eina k'shar haaretz. It's not like the rest of the world. Eina mekayem esem d'avodah zarah. It doesn't. It's not going to be okay with people doing the wrong thing. Uvi Sifren and the Sifren Azinu ve'ein imay el nechar. But the pasuk says that there is no strange god with him. Means shaloite rishus le'echad mi sari ha'umas lavo lishlot bachem keinu shneimar. There is no capacity of any other force ruling over the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael. Like the pasuk says, and Daniel, ve'ani yotze v'hinei sar yavan, etc. V'hu ma'amaram, she'amru kol hadar b'chutz la'aretz dama kemi she'ein la elaka. Any Jew that lives in chutz la'aretz is as if they don't have a God. Because we are not subservient. We don't have a relationship with Elohim Achirim. And yet, outside of Eretz Yisrael, we don't have that direct relationship with Hashem. So you got nothing. Shenemar laseis lachem es Eretz Canaan liyos lachem lelekim. I'm giving you Eretz Canaan, and then I'll be your God. That's when you have a relationship with me. V'omer, the pasuk says, Ki gershuni hayom mistapach menach las Hashem lemar lech avod Elohim achirim. You kicked me out of Eretz Yisrael. It's as if you said, go and worship other gods. Now, just in the interest of time, let's get to the pasuk in Yehoshua. V'amar b'tosefta d'avodah zarah, the pasuk says, the Tosefta says in avodah zarah, quoting from the pasuk in Bereshis, v'shavti b'shalom el beis aviva haya Hashem li le'elokim. Who says that pasuk? Yaakov, right? Yaakov is leaving Eretz Yisrael. And he davens, he says, V'shavti b'shalom el beis avi, you will return me Hashem to the house of my father. V'haya Hashem li le'elokim, and then Hashem will be my God again. No, this is Parsha Vayetze, right? By the ladder. Davens, he says, Rebbeinu Shalom, bring me home, and then you'll be able to be my God again. Doesn't mean that Yaakov was like leaving Eretz Yisrael to go worship other gods. It means that in Eretz Yisrael, the Rebbeinu Shalom is the direct source of everything. In Chutz La'aretz, it's indirect.
At this point, are we still limiting it to not sacrificing your children and not engaging in Aras, or have we expanded it to other? So
it is far more expansive than that. The Ramban already pointed that out, that Berube HaMitzvos, but it is paradigmatically Avodah Zarah and Gilui Aras. It says, V'omer, the pasuk says, L'aseh lachem eretz Canaan liyos lachem le'elekim, to give you the land of Canaan, that I should be your God. Kol zman she'atam be'eretz Canaan, hayisi lachem le'elekim. For as long as you are in Eretz Canaan, I am your God. Ein atam be'eretz Canaan, kivyachol ein ani lachem le'elekim. You're out of Eretz Canaan, I'm not your God anymore, so to speak. V'chein hu omer, and this is the pasuk in Yehoshua, as they crossed the Yarden, Ka'arba'im elef chalutzei hatzava avru livnei Hashem. about 40,000 members of the army walked before Hashem. This is before the Aaron. V'omer, and the pasuk says in Divrei Hayamim, "V'nichbasha haaretz lifnei Hashem u'lifnei amo," that the land was conquered before Hashem and before His people. Says the Ramban, "V'chi ta'aleh al da'atcha sheYisrael mechabshin es haaretz lifnei hamakim." If you think that the Jewish people are conquering the land before Hashem, what does that mean? Conquering the land before Hashem? We don't conquer the land before Hashem. Hashem helps us conquer the land. It says, Ella, Kol Zman Shehem Aleha, as long as the Jewish people are in Eretz Yisrael, Ki'ilu hi mechubeshes, it is considered conquered. The presence of the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael makes the land conquered to the Jewish people. It makes it our land. Because now you have the nation that has the unique relationship with Hashem, in the place that has a unique relationship with Hashem. But if we are not there, it is not conquered to us. Meaning, what conquers the land of Israel? The presence of the Jewish people. Everything else is simply technicalities.
I mean, it's not so much, it's contingent on our presence. It's not our presence which conquers. It's our presence then causes Hashem to conquer.
Both. Meaning, we'll say like this. You see this from time to time in the news. Like there's a question of like inheritance. So you'll have like, this butler and that housekeeper, and they're fighting about like the inheritance of like some rich old guy's mansion. Right, somebody's estate, and then all of a sudden comes like this long lost estranged son. It's obviously his, right? Yeah, he shows up. It's taken now. It's mine. So you have the butler that has been in service of this estate for 55 years, and the maid that has been working there and running the household for decades and decades. And then all of a sudden, like this little Yasala shows up, it's his, belongs to him. That's what the Ramban is saying. The moment that we cross the Yarden, everything clicks in. This land is the land of the Jewish people. Because we are the people that have a direct relation with Hashem, and Eretz Yisrael is the place that has the direct relation with Hashem. Now, as we pointed out last time, at some point in time that is going to expand the world over, and this is how the Ramban says, that at some point in time, the whole world and all the land and all the people are going to recognize this. But in the meantime, there's only one people in one place. That's where it is going to spawn from. It's going to grow from there. And that's the key to our pasuk here. So it's exciting to point out that this is what Yaakov Avinu says just before they get back to Eretz Yisrael. Just to close the circle here. Yaakov Avinu says, just as they are about to enter into Eretz Yisrael, he says, Hasiru es Elahei hanechar asher b'seichem v'yitar. Get rid of the Elahei hanechar. Right? Meaning you're about to re-enter into Eretz Yisrael. V'Hashem lo levado niskanu alilos shemeisa Rachel baderech. And that's when Rachel dies. V'tchilas b'ayim la'aretz v'lo yichnis la'aretz shtei achayos ki b'schusa lo yimeisa v'chus la'aretz u'b'schusa lo yoshav ba'aretz im shtei achayos. Now, this is the famous Ramban that he mentions in other places as well, that this is as a result of being in Eretz Yisrael, he could no longer be in violation of the Torah. The Torah that says that you cannot have two sisters that you are married to. The Ramban, in many places throughout his Parish al Torah, points out that the Avos kept all of the mitzvahs only in Eretz Yisrael. And the Ramban also points out that all the mitzvahs that are done outside of Eretz Yisrael are shadows of the mitzvahs that we will perform inside of Eretz Yisrael. It's all this thing. It's that everything works in its proper place. And everything is limping outside of its proper place. Which is why the Jewish people in Chutz La'aretz can never come to full success in a way that we could in Eretz Yisrael. And in Eretz Yisrael, we will never be fully successful if we're not showing Torah mitzvahs. Both of those things need to occur. All of that is on the pasuk of crossing through the Yarden, which is why, and we will discuss this better next time in much greater detail, as they cross over the Yarden, there is a chiyuv, and we'll discuss exactly what this chiyuv is, of taking 12 stones out of the Yarden and writing down all of the Torah on them, meaning a monument to what are we doing that we are now here. And there's this idea of taking that which is abstract and from outside of Eretz Yisrael and coming from Har Sinai and Shemayim and this incubator of 40 years in the desert and plugging it in. This moment of birth that we described last time, like now we're here. And that, Be'ez Hashem, will be part of what we speak about next time. And thank you so much. We will see you then.
This is